PodcastOne presents the Steve Austin Show Classics.
All right, man, I'm rolling sound over here at 317 Gimmick Street. Here in the studio, I got Ed Leslie on the video scope, as Randy Macho Man Savage would say, a.k.a. Brutus the Barber Beefcake. Sitting here looking at him on video. God dang, man, you and me have only crossed paths a few times in our illustrious careers. It's good to see you. You look like you're doing well. How you feeling?
I feel great. I'm large and in charge. About 6'3" and 280.
Well, God dang, what were you weighing in your prime in WWF?
About 255, 250. You know, you go up and down. Sometimes the long road things would knock you down 5 or 10. Then you get a little time off and bam, you know, get a few more days in the gym. You could pump up a little bit.
And dude, I know exactly what you're saying, because sometimes in the lean days in the USWA, they call that the Nutrisystem territory. And then the reason they called that because everybody that went there lost weight. And then when I got in WCW, depending on how hard you were running, if you know what I mean, if you're running with a fast crowd, and sometimes if you got out of the gym, you know, you'd start looking like hell and then get back in the gym and things start coming back around. But I always wondered, you maintained your physique to a really high degree. And listen, on this interview, I've listened to a couple of your other interviews on the internet, so we're going to jump all over the place just like we was riding up down the road, if that's all right with you.
That is great. That's great.
Hey, man, I'm glad I got an email and you and me started direct messaging each other on Twitter, and you decided to write a book. It's called Struttin Cuttin, the true story of Brutus the Barber Beefcake. So what made you decide to up and write a book? Because I went through the process, and for me, it was just a pain in the ass. How was this for you?
Oh, it's been a long road, man. I started years ago with a guy out of New York City. What was his name? Scott Epstein, who passed away a couple years ago. I don't know if you knew him or not. Oh. He was around that New York territory, and you know, it was like a manager thing close to superstar Billy Graham, I guess. I don't know, one of his buddies. But real nice guy, and I hooked up with him, and we started working on this on the book a few years back, and then he up and died, and his wife went rogue and wouldn't give anybody access to anything. So all my notes, everything that I did for about 2.5 years was lost. So I had to start over.
How were you at the recall process? Because I went through this, you know, it was after my infamous take your ball and go home thing. And I never really wanted to write a book. And so when I came back and said, okay, I'll write a book, and I hooked up with my very good friend, Jim Ross, and Dennis Brent helped out. But man, they really filled in a lot of the gaps for me, because I don't remember a whole lot of the things I did. How was your recall, since you lost all that notes trying to put it all back together for this book?
It was brutal, man. And, you know, I've had some pretty serious concussions, especially the one back in that accident. So, it did help talking to certain people that, you know, especially like Greg Valentine, because him and I were together for periods of years and stuff. And talking to him, man, it would help to kind of put stuff more back in the order. You know, sometimes you're in my mind, I'd be jumping around thinking, well, this happened in this year, and then we went to here and there, and I'd be all jumbled up. So it was tough. It was hard.
Hey, man, let's jump back to when, you know, I was reading in some of the notes that Kenny sent over to me. I know you grew up in Florida, but one of the things he kicked over to me that you, back in the day, enjoyed hunting.
Oh, yeah, man. From the time I was probably about 10 or 11. Some neighbors down the street, and the guy's dad was a big-time bird hunter, ducks. He had some real nice, these Italian shotguns. I can't remember the name of them, but I remember he had 16 and 20 and over-under, and I mean they were these real expensive guns. We still let us shoot them even though we were kids and stuff, man. It was a blast.
Well, just in watching you walk to the ring, you had one of, I consider it one of the best gimmicks of all time. I mean, first of all, you were on a roll just as Brutus Beefcake, but when you turn it into the barber thing, to see you walking down the aisle with those big hedge clipping shears, and here from San Francisco, California, and I'm looking at the notes that says, you know, back in the day, you were an avid hunter. I was like, man, I just don't picture Brutus out in the woods hunting.
Yeah, man. Growing up out here in Florida, there's a lot of, you know, it's lakes. Back in those days, it wasn't so developed. So, man, we were out bird hunting, duck hunting, dove hunting, quail hunting. There was a lot of birds. And then I had a friend that had guns. So we just took guns with us all the time. And we out in the woods, and we were kids with guns, man. It was a blast.
Hey, man, it seemed like growing up in Florida, you played baseball. Were you into contact sports at all? Did you play football as well, or did you concentrate solely on baseball?
Because I went to Catholic school for the first 9 years. There was no football, so it was basically basketball, baseball. Was the two. And then once we got to high school, I tried out for the football team and screwed my knees up in summer practice. And then by the time it came back to starting at the year, I just had lost interest in it, man. It just wasn't as fun as I thought it was going to be. I love baseball, though. That was it.
What position did you play?
I was a catcher and a pitcher.
That's what I played. I played catcher and I had a pretty good arm on me.
Yeah, I loved it.
But every now and then they say, hey, man, you can throw a baseball pretty hard. Let's try you out at pitcher. And I could throw strikes. I didn't have any junk, didn't have any curve balls. But as soon as a batter stepped up to the plate, Ed, that's when it messed me up because I didn't want to hit anybody. So that's when I got wild and all over the place. So they just kept me behind the plate, and I'd gun them down when they ran to second base.
That was fun. I remember doing that a few times. We loved it.
Hey, man, growing up in Florida had to have been a hell of a time for a young man or a young kid like yourself as far as trying to get in the business of pro wrestling. I know Texas was a hotbed. It was hot in Dallas, Houston, San Antonio. Of course, I grew up on Houston wrestling. Man, when did you first catch an eye or get wind of professional wrestling, and when did you fall in love with it?
Well, I don't even know what year. My oldest sister was kind of a tomboy, and so she talked me into going to the wrestling matches at the Armory in Tampa. And then once I went there a couple of times, then we went down to the where they taped the TV shows down there in Tampa, Port Tampa, or wherever it was, West Tampa, and just being in there and watching the Great Malenko and like Johnny Valentine and Dusty and just, Wahoo, and they a lot of guys came through Florida, like Texas too. I mean, everybody came through down here. So
at what age was it that you got a love for the business?
Probably 8, 9 years old, 10.
When did it become a realization that it's like, hey man, I'm actually going to do this? 19. And that's when you started?
Yep.
How long did you train for before you got in the ring?
Brother, I never really got a formal, take by anybody training me. I started basically working in the ring with the boys before shows and taking bumps, and basically they just threw me in the ring in a tag match and said, "Okay, here you go, man." And that's how I had to learn mostly by mistakes, in the ring. And it was brutal, but it was a great way to learn.
But who smartened you up to the business being a work? Because back in the day, dude, I thought the stuff was a shoot. And of course, going into my first match, gentleman Chris Adams didn't even smarten me up. I knew something was going on. He never taught us how to call high spots in the school. Right before my first match, that's when I truly understood that it was a work. And I knew something was up because it couldn't be a shoot, but he didn't smarten me up. So who smartened you up? And I watched your style, and I mean this is a compliment. I got so caught up in the gimmick, the persona and the character that you're playing towards the end of your WWF run. I forgot about your work, but you attacked the ropes. You're very athletic inside the ring. You're a big dude. So I think a lot of times your work gets overlooked, but you were a damn good worker. So I guess going back to my original question, who were those guys that you were working with? Because when I watch you work, in a way, sometimes you remind me of Magnum TA, believe it or not, just as far as mannerisms.
Well, he was one of the guys I used to watch, and I spent a year in Oregon and worked with some guys out there. I don't know if you would even know. Buddy Rose was out there at the time, but Rick Oliver, a guy, Stan the Man Stasiak, who was the WWF champion in New York, was out there. This is where Kurt Hennig and I had the first match Kurt ever had with him in Eugene, Oregon. him and his dad, the Axe, came in there, and they had a heck of a territory, Don Owen's territory. And, you worked every night, and I was working with, guys like Kurt and Rick Oliver, with Stan Stasiak. There was a decent crew of workers there, and just basically working every night, and then getting a chance to once in a while talk on TV and stuff like that. It really kind of prepared me to move up to, other territories.
Question. You're two young guys working together. If you're working with Kurt, who's working heel, who's working baby, and who's calling the match? Because both of you guys are
agreed. Yeah. I was basically working me kind of calling the match, because I think I was the heel back then in Oregon, and he was new coming in. Him and his dad came in. So basically, yeah, it was me, me calling the match.
How were you in front of the crowd? I remember, since I always wanted to be a wrestler, obviously I wanted to be in front of people, but boy, I was nervous as a long-tailed cat in a room full of rocking chairs, for those first couple years. And I wasn't able to have fun per se. When someone finally smartened me up and said, hey man, you can actually have fun out there while you're doing serious business, that's when I got better. But coming out of Florida, getting into the business, those guys training you, how did the crowd affect you? Were you a nervous guy? Were you strictly business? Wound tight? What was your MO?
The crowd had me pretty nervous until I, learned to forget about the crowd. Not forget about them. You got to really get them involved. That's the best thing. But
yes, sir.
Until I could just get that out of my head that they were watching me and then stop being, stop being froze up. Then, once I started getting loose and then, being able to relax in there, then that was the secret.
How long had you been working till the time you finally got the call up to WWF?
Probably about almost 7 years, man.
So by the time you got there, and that's about the length of time that I was working, give or take, when I got the call to go to then WWF myself. And so I felt, even though I had a real bad gimmick in the ringmaster, it was a foot in the door. But I felt once I got there, I was an accomplished mechanic and could have good matches with the guys. I wasn't over because I didn't have a good gimmick. How did you feel? And who recruited you? What was the hiring process back then? Because was Junior in charge back then, or was it still Senior?
No, it was Junior. I went through New York territory back in like 1979-ish for a short while. So I got to know everybody, Fuji and all the crew, all the office guys and stuff, because Vince Sr. was running the business then. So I got to know Patterson and Vince Jr. and everything. And then I moved on to a bunch of different territories, back to Pensacola, to Charlotte. I even got a Mid-South run for a while, in Nashville for Nick Goulas for a while. I mean, just everywhere. Maybe not Texas. A short run in the AWA territory. So I really got exposed. I did get exposed to a lot of guys, and there still was a lot of guys out there that are pretty cool that would actually help the young guys and stuff. Like Bobby Duncombe. I mean, there's a name from the past. A guy that was a big guy, I thought he had a hell of a gimmick and was over. Ivan Koloff, there were still guys that would help you. And I was going through that process, and I shot back through the territory on my way somewhere in like 1983, right when Hulk had won the belt from Sheik, and it was just going crazy. And I stopped in one night, like in Philadelphia or something, on my way home back to Florida, and they had a problem where John Studd was supposed to be going overseas for Otto Vance to do this finale of this big tournament he does every year. He always wants a big guy. And I think Terry was working with Otto Vance. So they said, he can't go. We need somebody. And Jerry threw my name in there. He says, well, what about Brutus? Because normally they never send anybody over who's not 350 pounds and a monster, So they said, okay, well, yeah, all right, we'll try. We'll give Bruce a shot at it. So they sent me over there. I don't think Otto was real excited because he's always looking forward to a big guy.
Yeah.
And basically went over there, and it was great. Enjoyed it. Otto was super and had a hell of a match with him. And when I got back, I mean, everything was cool. And bam, got the call, come to New York and going to meet with Vince Jr. and talk business. And I did. Terry was there, and we sat there and brainstormed up Brutus Beefcake.
I'm just glad to shoot the breeze with you because I've watched you for so many years. I'm glad you got this book out. We're not going to talk about everything in the book because we want people to buy the book, but you gotta drop the story on me about how y'all came up with the name Brutus Beefcake, because I know, according to my notes, Vince wasn't fond of it, and it turned out to be a gangbuster gimmick.
Well, the name Beefcake, I think, was from Linda McMahon. She had this idea, from what I understood, of Baron Beefcake, which is the way they were leaning, because they had some guys in the past. If you know Mike Cicluna, Baron Mike Cicluna, and then I think they were thinking a guy in a top hat with a butler with a tuxedo top on and something like that with this Beefcake gimmick and Beefcake name and. Geez, I just didn't even know. And then Terry, he's a ribber, man. Everybody, people don't realize how much that guy's a ribber. And he says, well, what about the name Brutus, like Popeye and Brutus? And then, so that got kicked around the room for a few minutes. And I'm sitting in the chair going, God, this is my big break in New York. And it's going to be the world. And my name's going to be Brutus Beefcake. They're going to laugh me out of the world. And oh my God. But it turned out to be, Steve, just the greatest name ever, because it was so outrageous. I just had to step up to be, like the name, and be outrageous like the name, because the name was so people couldn't forget it.
Well, that's funny because I love the name and it's got that great ring to it. And you hear that name one time, you'll never forget it. So, and being Brutus Beefcake, before you're going to become the Barber later on, and we'll get to that. But for me, Stone Cold, or me as Steve Austin, I'm pretty chilled down or turned down. I'm pretty private, but Stone Cold is way out there. How far was the Brutus Beefcake persona or character from Ed Leslie, the human being that walks through the airports?
Not that much farther out. I mean, always a little. You're definitely out there more. But, I was pretty, from what my wife talking to some of my friends, they say, well, I was always freaking wild and running around doing crazy shit before I ever started wrestling. So yeah. I got to think, I would just, it was just natural evolution of things, I guess. I don't know.
You're listening to another classic episode of The Steve Austin Show, only on PodcastOne.
Man, I was watching one of your first matches in WWF, and I think it was your first match, or at least they said it was on television. It was against a guy named Pat Morty, who would have been an enhancement guy. And, the commentary is really taking care of you from the get-go. I mean, they're saying good things about you. Hey, man, this guy's got a lot of potential and promise. So you had your meeting with Vince. I know he's not in love with the name, but you make your debut. Did he pull you aside and say, hey, man, here's what we're going to do with you? Because when I went there, I knew they were bringing me in just to be a mechanic. And, I made my own break and ran with it. So what was that meeting like with Vince? Was it intimidating, or did you know he had plans for you, or did you have to work this thing out and get that spot?
God, that's a crazy question. They really didn't lay out any big game plan or anything like that. They just said, here's what we're going to do first. We're going to do this. We're going to walk you around and do shop. Have the manager all going to shop you and stuff and everything. And basically, it was just me kind of out there winging it, I guess, a lot of it. But the reaction, I think Vince got hooked when he saw the reaction from the people and the crowd. And I think that's, and then things are just evolving and me just getting more and more confident. It's a little intimidating. You've still been on big houses, but when you get up there, in that first Madison Square Garden show, that's it's definitely intimidating, and then it's just being able to really getting into the character. And the more you got into it, then, they knew they had, they'd scored.
Man, one of the things I was noticing about your work, your real solid work, I love the way you attack the ropes, but as a babyface, before you do that heel turn, one of the things I really liked about Brutus Beefcake was your fire. And I'm guessing the way I put things together, and I was working more heel, but you going through some of those territories that you went through, especially up in Oregon, you was working down there in the South, all over the place. When you're going from territory to territory, and like you said, you're getting exposed to working with different guys, I imagine you put a lot of that together as far as, to me, I mean, I always say this because I don't think it always resonates with people. As a babyface, you have to have tremendous fire. As a heel, you have to have a mean streak. You had that great fire. You when you fired up, brother, it was real, and the people were buying into what, if you jacked with Brutus, you was going to get you were going to throw up the knuckles and start throwing punches. When did you become aware of that fire? As if you understand, as far as the tricks of the trade that I'm trying, the tools of the trade that I'm pointing out.
Yeah, that was just. I worked hard on that. People had told me that was, that you got to have that fire. You really got to show that emotion. If you want those people to believe in you, you really got to get it out there and let the people, know that it's for real. And then that's, so that I've worked hard to try to really do that. And I appreciate you saying good things about that. That was
it's one of the things that jumps off the page when I watch your work. Going into that setting in that locker room, and that was right in the middle of the big man days, because dang near everybody on the card's close to 300 pounds, if they're not over 300 pounds. Guys are all put together, and you had to have that larger than life persona. How competitive was that locker room?
Wow.
Because there was some crazy talent there, man.
Oh, it was different. It was a different day. I mean, competitive, but not in a, I don't know, not like not kind of the way it is more now, where it seems like guys nobody was worried about losing their spot. It was very light and fun in the dressing room. The Giant was always hanging out, playing cribbage and thing, and when people were around, Fuji's running around pranking everybody, things were happening. But it was so much fun. It was just fun being there around. Everybody was glad to be there, happy to be working, and business was going so good, and it was, it was a great time.
Hey, coming into, everybody's getting along, but I know, man, if somebody goes down, you're sorry for the guy that goes down, but, there's an opportunity. And it just seemed like back in the day, like everybody had a gimmick, everybody was a character. It was larger than life. And again, I was much younger, so maybe that's my perception. And I look back fondly through those, with those memories. Going into March 31st, 1985, WrestleMania 1. I guess the rock and wrestling thing was going on, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
The rock and roll, MTV and everybody, people are finally, who wouldn't associate with the wrestling business, even Hollywood a little bit, began to, look at us a little differently.
But when you guys started lighting that place up, and all of a sudden, WrestleMania 1 was, that was Vince's vision. That was Vince's idea. And man, nobody thought it would work. I mean, and if it failed, it was going to fail on a spectacular level. But if he hit it out of the ballpark, well, look where we're at. I guess we're heading into WrestleMania 34, 35. I don't even know. But dude, what was it like? I mean, how did he break that down to you that you guys were going to have a pay-per-view event of that magnitude? Because you were on that card against David Sammartino. But what was the vibe of the boys, knowing the task at hand was to, hey, we got to knock this pay-per-view out of the park?
Exactly that. Everybody was just such professionals, brother. Everybody got along. Everybody worked well together, and everybody just went out there with the mindset, hey, we're going to make this today's going to be the greatest day that we've had in this territory ever. And then we're going to freaking go up. You either go down together, but you all go up together too. And we knew this was a turning point, and that we had to produce, and that we were all going to go up and benefit from this. And boy, we had no idea though how really big it was going to be.
Man, your match with David Sammartino there, Luscious Johnny V, your manager gets involved. Boy, all of a sudden, here comes the all-time legend Bruno Sammartino running down to the ring. What was it like when the crowd popped for him and you guys had him hook, line, and sinker, and you're doing business with a legend like Bruno?
You know, I was just ecstatic and feeling very honored, proud, just that, you know, that they had thought enough of me and that to do this and to make this all happen. They saw in me, you know, greatness or whatever, and knew that we were going to make it all happen out there and everything was going to be good. And it was as good as it could be. And it was just, you know, it was just an amazing thing to have happen, you know.
But I read that Bruno Sammartino had taken a liking to you. Did you guys get along? Were you friends in the back?
Yeah, we were friends. I really loved talking to him. And we worked together many times, actually, later on.
How over was that guy?
Oh, it was just insane. I worked with him in Pittsburgh, in his hometown, man. We had a hell of a match, and it was just amazing. You know, the crowd was just going bananas. It was so easy.
Hey, man, when the Rock and Wrestling Connection was going on, did the boys ever think, hey, man, is it more about them than it is us? Was there any jealousy? Did they feel like the musicians were getting too much attention, or did they know that this was a good thing and it was a good rub? And it was good for everybody.
I think there's still, you know, there's always a few hardcore guys that don't think that it's, you know, worth the time. But I think we're younger guys, the younger guys and stuff, everybody knew where this was going, and everybody, and they embraced it. That whole album thing that we did, the wrestling album, and that was a day from hell. You know, we spent like 12 hours on this stage going over and over and over to try to film that thing. But it was, you know, it was just getting the rub from that thing, and then MTV and VH1 and everybody jumping on board. It was crazy.
Hey, man, the main event was Hogan and Mr. T versus Paul Orndorff and Roddy Piper. I know you were doing your own thing, but you're in that, you know, the Garden is a small building. It's a great building, one of the best buildings you can work in. With an event that massive, did you come across Mr. T at all? How was he? Because before Roddy Piper passed, you know, I would talk to him, and you know, Orndorff was, you know, he's Mr. K, super kayfabe, and to some degree there wasn't any love lost. Did you have any interactions with Mr. T at all?
Yeah, I did. And then later on, too, we worked together a couple times in some other stuff. But yeah, some of the guys had a problem with T. I didn't. You know, I realized, you know, he's in his own way. He's kind of like us, man. He's working his gimmick, doing his thing, and he's an actor, but he's just working his gimmick, and not unlike us. And then, you know, that's all. You know, I accepted him for what he was, and I never had a problem. We were friends.
It's funny because I got a chance to do a little business with Mike Tyson, and I loved it. And it turns out, you know, when I'd sit backstage and talk with Mike, you know, he knew more about the history of the business than a lot of the boys because he was such a wrestling fan. So he was a wealth of knowledge, and I had a good time doing business with him. But I just wanted to ask because, you know, Mr. T wasn't a boxer, but, you know, he played the boxer in the movie of Rocky, and just massive personality type person. But Mike was electric, and he certainly brought a ton of eyeballs to the main event at WrestleMania 14 when I wrestled Shawn Michaels and got the belt for the first time. And Mr. T brought that outside exposure as well as all the people from the rock and roll world. And that was just, you know, again, it was just a great main event, and those guys pulled it off. And man, here we are going into, you know, the next WrestleMania. I want to ask you a question because you were having your singles run, and they decided to pair you up with Greg Valentine. Greg Valentine, obviously, second generation? You know, his father in that plane crash, I guess, broke his back, and that messed him up. But did they put you with Greg Valentine as a guy to learn from, or they just figured you guys would have good chemistry and would form, you know, as you formed the dream team, just be a good tag team? You
know, honestly, brother, I don't know if they were thinking I was going to learn from him. I think it was kind of by chance thing happening. The agents got stuck, or somebody, when they were booking, I think it was George Scott was booking them. I don't know if you knew him. He was from the South, whatever guy. Greg was real big, knew him real well. And I think they just stuck us together by chance just to see what would happen. because I think some people, they maybe have discussed it and said, you know, Valentine, his style, and Beefcake, his style, they're like oil and water. But the whole thing was that the oil and water thing worked. we began to mesh.
Now, I know you started, you were doing some tag team wrestling earlier in your career, and some of it with Hogan, and then you got off on a singles run. Now you're back in a tag team. How did you enjoy tag team wrestling? Because, when I started out, dude, I was a single. And then we were down at a television taping, and unbeknownst to me, Dusty Rhodes decides to put me and Brian Pillman together to form the Hollywood Blondes. And I was so opposed to it. Once I got acclimated to it and we turned it into what we turned it into, it was a blast because you've got 4 guys in the ring. You can pull the referee in a million different directions. So many more things can happen. You're doing half the work. So I loved it. But in my heart, I was a singles wrestler. So since you were on a singles run, what were your thoughts being a part of a tag team?
I was just like you just said, man. I thought, hey, I really want to concentrate. I'm a single guy, and then the whole tag team thing. But once we began to, like you said, master it, all of a sudden you realize, oh, wait, this is way easier. So much more distractions and so much more things you can do in there, and easier, way easier. I was like, then it became fun. Once it became fun in there, then we just went crazy.
You're listening to another classic episode of The Steve Austin Show, only on PodcastOne.
The Steve Austin Show. The Steve Austin Show.
All right, I'm back at 317 Gimmick Street. Brutus and Barber Beefcake is on the other end of the line. I'm looking at it through the video scope, as Randy Savage would say. We're just shooting a breeze, man. We're riding down the road in a car together. I'm drinking a beer. I don't know what Brutus is doing, but I'm drinking a beer. And God dang it, WrestleMania 3 was in the Pontiac Silverdome in 1987. 93,000 people. All right. Roddy Piper versus Adrian Adonis in a hair versus hair match. One of my favorite matches of all time. And I guess Roddy was going to leave the business to go do some acting. And, man, all of a sudden, you had worked earlier that night, right, in the match right before. Yep. Yeah, and then you come out there, and then, shoot, what happened? Adrian let go of the sleeper too soon. You came out there, give him the old gimmick, wake-up slap on the back of the neck. He puts Adrian to sleep, and then all of a sudden, you do the favors as far as taking off the hair of Adrian Adonis. Tell me about that night, and tell me about that crowd, because, dude, I've seen a lot of WrestleManias. I've been in a couple of them. That crowd was on fire.
It was crazy. It just had some huge pops. They'd already, everything, them announcing the giant, all that stuff. They left me in the ring. They had tagged up Greg with Dino Bravo. So we had wrestled the Rougeau brothers, and then Greg chummied up with our opposition, and then they all left, and I just left me in the ring. And it was kind of weird, because then the crowd didn't really know what was going on, how to react. And I went to the back, and then when they told me what they wanted me to do, to come out with Piper and the whole thing, but Piper really handed me the shear, said, no, you do it, Brutus. They didn't really tell me I was shaving Adrian's head. Just me and Roddy were out there, and Roddy goes, oh, you do it. I was like, no, you do it. He goes, you do it. I was like, okay. And then we started I couldn't get the shaver to work. Adrian's hair was so greasy, matted, sweat, and whatever. I don't know. There was a weak pair of clippers, too. And I panicked. I was panicking. There's 93,000. There was at least 100,000 people in there, I swear. You couldn't see an open spot anywhere, even in the doorways all the way around. And I almost panicked. And then finally the clipper started working, and the hair started coming off, and I'm throwing it in the air, and the people were just going bananas.
Dude, they ripped it up too, because that match wasn't real long, but it was so classic and just two great personas and characters. I'm one of the biggest Adrian Adonis fans that there was, and this was at a time when he was pretty heavy, but when it came time to get the heat, he just got nasty and mean, and he had an unlikable trait as a heel to begin with, which was worked in his favor. Huge fan of his work, and of course, man, Roddy blew the roof off the place when he was walking out. People didn't want him to leave, and just the way those two guys were like just yin and yang in the ring, and just the story that they told. Are you shooting with me when you say that y'all didn't plan you to shave the head that night? And that was Roddy's call?
Roddy's call, man. And Adrian and I had some history, even though we're both heels now, in a tag match somewhere. And he was going to try to shave like Rick Martel, the babyface, and Rick Martel switched places with me, and then Adrian came over with the shears, and started shaving my head. And then there was a big standoff, heel against heel there, but didn't go anywhere. Just promos. They showed me with my head. I'm screaming at Adrian, "I'll get you!" And then they basically left it there. And then next thing was WrestleMania and the whole thing. And when I come down to help Piper, and then Roddy just goes, "Yeah, Brutus, it should be you." I said, you do it, man. He's like, no, they want you to do it. You go ahead. So then, bam, so I did it. And I never had any idea where it was going to go.
Before we go to where it was going to go, what was your relationship with Adrian, and what are your thoughts of his work?
I had met him in AWA days, him and Jesse Ventura and stuff. And I watched Adrian work, and he just had that confidence, that style. Kind of reminds me of the Harley Race.
Yep.
That kind of Harley Race, confidence, and Adrian's backdrops, and he'd do things in the bumps he would take. He's, like you said, he had that mean streak, man. He knew how to get mad, mean, and get the heat. No problem. Instantly. he had it.
Hey, man, tell me about we talked about this briefly on the phone before we started rolling sound. So you're coming out of the Dream Team. You're a heel, but you're about to become Brutus the Barber Beefcake out of this angle that was shot at WrestleMania 3. And, man, to me, it looked like you were going from a guy who was a straight-up worker with a persona and a great gimmick, and now all of a sudden you're a true gimmick because you're the barber, and you started, maybe you start off with the scissors, but then you started going to the hedge clippers because it was more of a visual, but you got a little bit lost in transition, I think, in our past conversation, because you're kind of going from heel to baby. You'd been a baby before, but now you've got to work this gimmick into it. So what were your thoughts and when all that was happening and going down, and how you made that transition to make it all work to the level that you did, because you got it over huge?
You're not going to believe this, but they really didn't tell me before about the barber gimmick at all. We came back from WrestleMania into Rochester, New York, the War Memorial there. I don't know if you remember it. They might have torn it down by the time you got through, but it was an old, crappy old building. And we came back, and I walk in, and somebody came over, Steve Taylor, one of them, says, "Hey, we got to go over here to a barber shop, and we got a photo shoot." I'm like, "What do you mean a photo shoot? Barber shop? What are you talking about?" Just come on. So they load me up, take me over to this barber shop, and they hand me this white coat and a little thing with like a pin pack with a scissor and a comb in it. And they hand that to me in there. Pat Patterson's there, and Pat says, "Okay, now you're the barber." Or whatever. And I looked at him. I said, "I'm a what? You're the barber." I'm like, "What's a barber?" Brutus the Barber Beefcake now. And they took pictures of me in the barber shop, like cutting one of the referee's hair and stuff, and doing, make all these faces. And I swear to God, if you could find one of those old pictures of me that has the white coat on with the scissors, and really look at my face, that face tells the whole story. Because, man, I was hot. I was mad. I was like, they didn't tell me, and I had no idea. They sprung it on me. And then I said, and I was like, man, Brutus Beefcake was on fire, and I was over, and having great matches and everything was going well. And then all of a sudden they threw this thing on me, a new gimmick. Okay, now you're the Barber. And I was like, I don't want a new gimmick. I want to just do what I'm doing here. I'm just really starting to really get good at what I'm doing here. And so it was a little tough. The transition was a little rocky. And I just had to jump into it with both feet and get even more creative. And that's when I started getting hairsprays. And like you said, the visuals, I got the hedge clippers. I said, man, first time I walked out and there was, 27,000 people and I had the little scissors in my hand and the people, and I realized I'm like, this is not going to do it. It's not visual enough, and then so the hedge clippers came out and the people went crazy.
Yeah, I mean, because when you're in row 100, way in the cheap seats, and you can't see the little bitty scissors, but you can damn sure see those hedge clippers.
Yeah, and that was a game changer too. The clippers just excited the people. They were nuts.
Hey man, before we move on, because I want to ask you some other things moving on into the future, but let's go back to WrestleMania 3 right there at the Pontiac Silverdome, because the main event was Hulk Hogan versus Andre the Giant for the WWF Championship, and so I guess that's kind of Andre passing the torch, and Hogan and Andre drew that house, I would say. I mean, the whole card drew the house, but they were the main event, so they drew that house. On that card was the one and only Randy Macho Man Savage versus the one and only Ricky the Dragon Steamboat in one of the greatest matches in the history of the business. What were y'all's thoughts backstage while this event is going on? It's WrestleMania 3, 93,000, the business is on fire, and these two guys go out there with George Animal Steel and Elizabeth and just rip the roof off the place.
Unbelievable. Randy, geez, he was just incredible. And Steamboat, I was like, every match was getting better than the next. And then when you thought nothing could beat that, then, Randy and Steamboat came out there and tore the house down. And then, Hogan and Andre's match. And it just, the whole night was like that. Everybody just went crazy, went above and beyond and just made the night just, the best WrestleMania ever.
Hey man, in some of the notes, and moving on from WrestleMania 3 there at the Pontiac Silverdome, I'd like to talk to you a little bit about how you came up with the look that you came up with, because it was a great look with a lot of marketing, kind of, to me, a little bit ahead of its time. And you went to a rock and roll clothing designer. How'd that all break down? Because that was forward thinking and self-preservation or self-push on your part.
I got a phone number from Hulkster, and I called this guy, and I said, he said, yeah, come on over, let's meet, let's talk. And then basically the guy, he was ahead of his time. He was incredible. This guy, Michael, his business called Michael and Tony, and we just brainstormed. I kind of told him, what my thinking was, how this character and stuff is. And so he walked me into his shop. He had like in the back of his house, his whole shop, and started showing me all the rock and roll clothes, the spandex, animal prints and different things. And he came up with the idea to put the bow tie with the rhinestones and all these armbands with different stuff on them. And I'm looking at it and going, yeah, I like this a lot. Nobody's ever done anything like it. So if I can get away with it, if I can pull it off.
Dude, how much were those outfits costing you? Because that stuff wasn't cheap.
Oh, it's crazy expensive. I invested a lot in it, but it was worth every penny. I bought so many things that I could wear different clothes every time. Basically, I went to the ring. I never had to wear the same thing for 6 months, and we were working a lot.
Hey man, and this is some 411 you'll drop in the book, and you'll find out a lot more if you actually buy the book, which is on sale right now at BrutusBeefcake.com. You ended up hooking up Savage with your guy to make his gear.
Yeah, you know what? Some guys would think, I don't want him anything, like that. But that's not me. Randy and I were great friends, and everybody had a little rocky relationship with Randy. That was just Randy. But I was happy to turn him on because he was floundering. He was trying, but you got to admit the short tights and knee pads thing was nowhere near like the new Macho Man with the hats and all his stuff. It just really helped Randy and I think it really made him took his comfort levels and his confidence just to the next level.
How was that guy just hanging around him? Because to me, he's one of the most intense performers in the history of the business, and the guy that I just got a tremendous amount of respect for. The guy could just flat out work his ass off. The whole Macho Man character, to me, and just watching some of his interviews, that's kind of who he was. But how was that guy? And did you learn anything just from hanging around him as far as intensity or just him as a performer?
Well, yeah, no, his work in the ring is his intensity. Yeah, that I always try to learn from the guys that I work with and hang around with. And Randy, yeah, that intensity that he always had, even, you know, out of the ring and stuff and stuff, he always had, he'd be relaxed and everything, but he would always come up quick to bring the intensity level super high, so fast. And I think I kind of helped, you know, learn that was a good thing, you know, to steal from him.
Hey, one of my good friends back in the day, he'd already went through his WWF run, and you guys had already crossed paths, was Ravishing Rick Rude, and he came down to WCW. I don't remember the give or take the year. It was 92, 93, whatever. He came in, and, you know, all of a sudden he was our top heel, and we started hunting together down there in South Georgia. I got a chance to watch you work with him on YouTube. How was Rick in the ring? Because we went down the roads together. You were working with him. He was just, to me, he was a tremendous heel. But how was he to work with and a communication level inside the squared circle?
We didn't have any problems. I think there was a little friction between me and him, but once we settled down, you know, with each other in the ring and stuff, we always had a good time in there. We had fun and stuff. And you know, I love Rick. But, you know, Minnesota boy, and, you know, I had known his background and everything. And so, you know, we were good friends.
Well, what was the friction from?
Just, you know, there was a kind of point where he was almost, people would say he was like Brutus Beefcake. The Ravishing Rick Rude was like, he was trying to steal Brutus Beefcake or something. I don't know. But it was like, you know, I don't have a problem with anybody's gimmick, you know, anything like that. There was no heat with me, but it was like, you know how people talk and stuff. They were making it look like people were saying like there was heat, that I had heat with him because he, you know, he had his picture on his pants or any of that stuff. You know how people talk. So, I mean, you know, but we were always perfect and fine in the ring together. You know, there was never a problem.
One more question about another guy. Come from Minnesota. You just said perfect. Mr. Perfect, Kurt Hennig, one of my favorite guys. A guy always had a smile on his face. If he ever had a bad day, I never knew about it. And he was always ribbing people. But he was a tremendous worker. How'd you enjoy working with that guy, and how was he in the locker room?
Kurt was he was never a dull moment in the locker room, always up to something, and working with him was a dream, man. I mean, Kurt and I could have a match without saying a word, you know, beforehand, and we just seemed to know what each other were thinking, and we just had so much fun in there. I mean, they made a mistake a couple of times and put us on early, you know, in some of these cards and then like West Virginia and some of the towns and stuff, that maybe there was a title match or something was the main event, and they'd shoot us on one of the real early matches. Man, we'd have a match, we'd just tear the house down, and then it was like after trying to follow the match was hard. The people were like sitting there watching, going, "Oh, this is boring." And they learned a valuable lesson. Not because perfect. It was, you know, I mean, it's all perfect. He was doing this somersaults and flying over the top rope, and I'd hit him with an uppercut, and he would take this bump. He'd go over the turnbuckle, over the post, and land on the floor from like a big uppercut punch. It was the craziest bump you ever seen in your life. It was just, and the people would go bananas. You know, I mean, he was just such a worker.
And there's the thing about him was he has that tremendous spring in his legs. Like if you were kicking his legs away, he could damn near do a somersault or a flip around or the spring over the top rope, almost the oversell. But I mean, it was just so dynamic. He was the only one that could do it. You'll see guys try to emulate it, but he was kind of the first guy I'd ever seen do that. So I know exactly what you're talking about. Before we move on, I want to ask you about a couple of ribs that were going on back in the day. But tell me about life on the road back in the WWE WWF back in the day, because this is, you know, again, that was kind of the Wild Wild West days where there were still some territories out there. But, man, were you guys, well, I'll speak for myself during the Attitude Era. They always called it the Attitude Era. They had to give it a name, I guess, but I've always thought that professional wrestling or professional wrestlers all had attitudes. Dude, I was living it up pretty good. I was running pretty fast. And, you know, man, I was hanging with the drinking crowd. That was kind of my thing. Who were you running up and down the road with back in the day on the road? And what kind of things were y'all getting into, just as far as having a good time, being on the road?
Well, it depends on who was there. You know, I hung with Piper quite a bit, so you know what Roddy was doing.
Yeah.
So, we were at the Stay Out All Night Club there in Chicago till the sun came up. Adrian was with us. Everybody, you know, we'd be all, that, you know, you knew you weren't going to sleep that night. You didn't even try. You didn't even try. But the guys are great. You know, there was Morocco and Orton and. We're pretty cool. We're good for hanging out and stuff. We all try to hit the gym together too and stuff. But you know, a lot of the guys would go out and would stay up or go to the bar and have and drink, have beers together. The guys, you know, Junkyard Dog back. he was a funny guy. He was a great guy. We just had so much fun. You know,
man, I tell you what, man, we would get out on the road, kind of like you guys did, and after you get out on the road and you're running that hard like you are because you're working hard in the ring, you're going to the gym, you're staying out late because you're a pro wrestler and that's what you do. So then by the time, you know, you get a gut full of that, you're ready to go home. And as soon as you get home, after about a day and a half, you're antsy and you want to get back on the road again. Was it the same for you?
Yeah. Always. Yeah. You go home for 2 days and you're like, oh, man, get the hell out of here. Telling me what to do.
Man, when you brought up, when you said Morocco and Bob Orton Jr., Jesus Christ, I like that guy's work. And Morocco as well. Y'all had such a damn locker room there. How about the damn ribs? Because you were there right in the middle of it. And I heard so many Fuji stories, but what was it with that guy in the ribs and who else was ribbing and what kind of stuff was going on that you could tell and not incriminate anybody?
Well, the Bulldogs came in, took Fuji's lead right away. They would always sneak in. Davey Boy would sneak in, or Dynamite too. They'd sneak into into my bag and grab scissors out. And one of their favorite ribs was like cutting pants legs off, cutting people's shirts up into ribbons, cutting their socks. I mean, just doing crazy stuff with the scissors. One of the referees one night, they cut the leg of his pants off. It's the only pair of pants he had. We're in Baltimore, and it's about 10 below zero, and the poor guy has no pants to wear home. And I think somebody finally gave him a pair of sweatpants so he could leave the building. The Bulldogs were brutal with the scissors.
Were you a guy that got ribbed a lot, or did they pretty much leave you alone?
They didn't bother me too much. You know, I had a special relationship with Fuji. He just loved me, and I loved him, man. He was a mentor kind of guy. So he would always give me the office when something was going down to make sure I would not miss out and know what's happening. And so I was privileged just to watch the funniest shit happen ever and not being on the receiving end of it, man. I'd be like, you know, oh, okay, you know, and sneaking off after. But, they didn't bother me too much. I got a few ribs here and there, but, you know.
If you get under Fuji's umbrella, so then you get a pass on a lot of the ribs.
Oh, yeah. Well, and Fuji, he took care of us. You know, we were running hard, and Fuji was our go-to guy, and he kept us rolling for.
And man, sometimes you know the ribs will you know make the boys laugh. It'll relieve some of the pressure. It'll boost up the morale. But you know, sometimes like some of the stupid things that were going on down south, or even probably up there, like if you wore a pair of blue jeans, they could just tie one knot in one leg, and just one guy would be at the other end, the other guy would be at the other, pulling that knot tight. Brother, when you try to untangle that one knot in those blue jeans, it might take you 2 or 3 days, and you might go Broadway. way. And if you work it at some little crappy gym, all the little combination locks that were unlocked, those would end up on someone's belt loop inevitably, and no one knew the combination. So there'd be guys, they'd either cut their belt loops off or they'd be walking around with padlocks on their belt loops because they had been ribbed, and that's all they had to wear.
Oh, the Bulldogs loved that one too. They would sneak in the coach's office and find a pass key and then take 20 locks off and put all 20 locks on somebody's bag.
Hey, dude, only in the business of pro wrestling. I'm sitting here looking at ribs in a locker room, just some more notes. Give me the story about Piper, JYD, and Brutus in a car.
Oh man, geez, we were in somebody's. We had a Cadillac. I think Piper had a car. He actually had a car there. Mostly we didn't have cars, but we were cruising down the road. We had a 150-mile trip, and dog was kind of in and out a little bit. So Piper reaches into his bag and pulls out this chunk of this black thing, a big, like a ball. I said, what's that? He goes, here, put this in your mouth, like chewing tobacco. Put it in your lip. So he gave me a piece. He gave dog a piece. And next thing you know, about 15 minutes later, man, we were all just giggling and laughing and joking. And we couldn't stop laughing. And we had some serious fun, when we got to the arena that night, because all three of us were just like three school kids, and we just couldn't stop laughing and joking, making fun of each other, saying things, and everybody's like, what's going on with them guys, man? What's that?
Hey, as I'm looking at you on the screen right now, and I remember you from back in the days prior to your parasailing accident, and then all of a sudden I was reading about that accident, and I watched the piece that the WWE did on you on What Are They Doing Now. It was on their network. Dude, walk me through that. I mean, I know you've told the story a million times, but now that I'm sitting there looking at you, because, you said you stuck your finger in your mouth because your palate was crushed. Everything was hanging down. You couldn't breathe. Tell me what happened. Give me that story.
Well, fast version, we were having a hell of a party on the 4th of July, and my buddy's lake house. We had motorcycles there. We had a big barbecue. We had we were going to have a band that night, and we'd been doing some jet skiing and water skiing, everything, parasailing on the lake. And we basically said, all right, let's put this stuff away. We're going to get ready to cook in a little while. We were all going to jump on our Harleys and take a spin. And Brian Blair shows up, the wrestler B. Brian Blair, and with a couple friends. And he had this girl who wanted to go parasailing. We were like, oh no, we put that all away. We're going to take a little ride on our bikes. We'll be back. Oh, no. It turned into a big shit show to get this parasailing thing. So my buddy throws his arms up in the air, runs in, grabs a parasail thing, drags it out, ties it to the boat. I'm working on trying to keep the rope from getting tangled up, and they got this girl, and they're putting her in a harness and the parachute and thing, and to go parasailing, and you have to start on the beach when a small lake. So my buddy just about ready to go, and he just says, to hell with this, and just hammers down the boat. I was out in the water in between, kind of, and I realized he's just gonna pancake this girl. She's just gonna get dragged in the water, all kinds. She could get hurt, and I'm trying to stop him. I'm like, no, don't go, man, don't do it. And it just happened so fast. By the time I turned around, a matter of seconds, to look to see where the girl was, having no idea that I'm in harm's way right there. I turn, and as I turn, her knees, she's just coming off the ground in the parachute and the parasail and this harness, and her knees are together and bent. So her knees like a battering ram, and her knees just hit me right in the face. I turned right into it, never even saw it, and it hit me so hard that it pushed me. I was in about 1.5 feet, 2 feet of water. Ripped me out of the water, threw me in the air, head went back and feet came over the front, and then I landed back on my feet. And the only reason I'm even alive today is because that impact at about 30 miles an hour didn't knock me out. Crushed everything, but it did knock me out.
But what'd you do, dude? I mean, because you said you couldn't breathe, you kind of stuck your thumb or whatever so you could breathe. How did they get your ass to the hospital, and what did the doctors think when they saw this mess that was your face?
Yeah, I came up, and optic nerves were damaged. I couldn't see, and I knew I was hurt bad. And then when I couldn't breathe out, I got my finger and created an airway. They called the ambulance. They took me to the closest hospital. dump me off. And then next thing you know, somebody finally comes over and starts checking on me, and they take my blood pressure, and they say, "Oh my God, they think I'm having a heart attack." They start calling Code Blue, and everybody's running around, and they think I'm having a heart attack because I'm trying to tell them with my hand stuffed in my mouth. I'm hurt bad. I'm hurt bad. It's not my heart. I'm hurt.
Jesus.
And finally they got me in, and they took an X-ray of my head, and that's when they realized that it was really bad because my face is gone.
So what did they do? Did they start the surgery right then, or did they have to create all the titanium pieces? Well, what did they do?
We were in a crappy hospital. They had no equipment. Just by chance, it just happens to be the best reconstructive doctor in the world nearby, working and living in Tampa, Florida. This accident happened in Lutz, Florida, and so somehow he found out. They called him in. He came to the hospital, and basically they had to bring in 18 wheelers with imaging, 3D scanning, all this equipment, because they had nothing at this hospital, and they couldn't move me. They said because it was a head trauma, they didn't want to take the chance of moving me to another hospital. So they just carted me in and out of the hospital onto the trucks, and they took all this scans and stuff. And this doctor, he had all the clout, man. When he snapped his finger, man, people stood at attention, and he had to get four or five teams of doctors, brother, together. They had to have a team of doctors to work on my mouth because my teeth and my palate was broken. They had to have ear, nose, throat people that reconstruct my palate. They had to have the optical people that work on my optic nerves because I was blind. Then they had the neurosurgeons that were there because the head injury, they didn't know what they were looking at, if my brain was going to bleed they were just to put together all these people was just crazy, incredible.
Dude, you're pretty much on top of the world as far as the wrestling scene goes. All of a sudden, this happens. Where was your mind at? All of a sudden, your face is crushed. Your life is changed. What'd you do mentally? How did that would have f***ed with me pretty goddamn bad.
I was in a low place. I lost both of my parents within the last 2 years before this happened. And I was in a bad marriage and just got hit with divorce papers. And and now I was laying there in the hospital with no hope. They're saying there is no hope. They didn't think I was going to live. They said, there's no hope that you will ever wrestle again. You'll never ride your motorcycle. They don't even think you're going to live. And so I was like, well, I guess it can't get any worse than this. I don't know what happened. It just suddenly, I guess, because I was just depressed about everything, my parents and losing a lot of money in the divorce. And then all of a sudden I was fighting for my life, and all that shit didn't matter. All of a sudden it just was like, man, I guess now it's a question of, do I want to live? And I guess, yeah, I want to live, man. From then on, it was just a fight.
How long was the recovery process from that, man?
Oh, well, that's kind of hard to say. Before I really wanted to get in the ring, it was probably about 18 months before I felt easy in the ring. But I don't know anything about muscle memory or whatever, but maybe the doctor said that the only reason I was alive was because my body, the shape I was in, they said, body just wouldn't die. Your heart just kept right on beating and so that being said, I lost 55 pounds with my jaws wired shut for 3 months. I couldn't eat. So that time period, I was completely weak, had to basically sleep in a sitting up position, couldn't lay down for the 8 months. No laying down whatsoever. And so once the wires came out of my mouth and I could eat, then I started eating, went right back in the gym, started just riding a bike on zero even. And that was hard. And it was a struggle. Big time.
Hey, man, how long were you gone before you came back? And did you go right into doing the Piper's Pit, or was that back into in-ring action?
Well, we did a couple.
I'm not Piper's Pit. I mean, the barber shop. My bad.
I had some matches. I had some matches and went bad and everything. And then I'm not exactly sure whether it was Vince or Linda or who actually came up with the idea to do the barber shop, but they thought it would take the pressure off me trying to get back in the ring and let me have a little more time to heal, because it's still, I mean, that head thing, it's hard to say how long it takes to, mentally, even sometimes it takes more time mentally to heal than physically, just being not gun shy in there. You know what I'm saying? When, if a fist or a foot or something's flying at your face, and if you're, totally thinking about that, it's not good. You can't really work that way,
Oh, absolutely, man. I mean, when I came back from my neck fusion, there was just a little bit of concern just as far as taking a flat back bump. But after, obviously what you went through would be at a whole different level. So I can understand that. But hey, when y'all did the at WrestleMania 9, when it was Money Inc. Versus the Mega Maniacs, after that, I mean, you were gone from the WWF. What happened? Why did you decide to leave at that point? Did you go down to WCW with Hogan, or did WWF say, "Hey, man, we've got no more plans for you. We'll see you down the road"?
No, I never. I probably would have been better for me to talk to him before I left, but I never really did. I went with Hogan down, and it wasn't really to go to WCW. We went down to Florida to make a movie and a television series called Thunder in Paradise.
Yeah.
Reicher Entertainment was doing it, and all the guys from Baywatch were Terry's a production company that did Baywatch, and so was starting off in a new thing, being a actor and a stuntman.
Hey man, before we let's shut it down, I want to remind people about the book. What's the name of the book again, Brutus?
It is Struttin and Cuttin: The Life of Brutus Beefcake.
Hey man, before we sign off, I'd love to talk to you again for part 2, if you want to, in a couple of weeks after the book is out, to create some more awareness. But just as far as helping some brothers out, when you first rolled in, and again, we're out of sequence here, but when you first rolled into WWF, from the time you rolled out, what was your relationship like with Vince McMahon? Because, when I went in there, I didn't know the man. I knew that he was my boss. And then as I got further up the card, that's where, I started getting to know the man, because, we were business partners for all practical purposes. But, he's a guy that's been around for so long. And, he knows, he's like a psychologist, a psychiatrist. He's your boss. He's your best friend. He's your dad. But you got to form a relationship with the guy. How was your relationship with Vince?
It was good, man. And I got to, tell you the truth. I was totally intimidated, at first by that whole, the Vince McMahon, the family, the whole thing, the Linda McMahon. But then after a while, I started getting to know him. And then I started out just really scared of him. And eventually, he was almost like one of the boys. He was cool.
You got any advice for anybody that's trying to climb up the ladder in the WWF or any territory for that matter, just as far as dealing with promoters or the bosses?
I say, I don't know, be yourself and stand up for yourself. Have confidence in yourself and believe in yourself and speak up for yourself. Because, the guys who speak up for themselves are usually the ones that are they're going to succeed.
Well, you're 100% right on that. And the only thing I'd add in there is don't be afraid to go out on a limb, at least a little bit.
Take a chance. Yeah, absolutely, man. Taking a chance. I was all about, breaking new ground all the time. Hope I didn't get in trouble for it. You were too, man. I loved watching you and the stuff, man. You'd climb up in the corner with a can of Budweiser and chug, and I thought, man, why didn't I think of that, man? That's the greatest thing I've ever seen. And I love watching you, man. You were always fun, entertaining, and I thought, man, that's the greatest gimmick ever. I wish I could have thought of that.
Man, I tell you what, I used to tell people towards the end, Ed, I said, hell, I was drinking for a living and wrestling on the side. It worked out pretty good. Hey, man, it was awesome catching up with you. Good luck with the book. On Twitter, you are at BrutusBeefcake _ on Twitter.
Instagram, Brutus_Beefcake, and then BrutusBeefcake.com is where the book is.
You can find the book at BrutusBeefcake.com. And hey, dude, let's let a couple of weeks go by and let's shoot the breeze again, because you had a way longer career than we've talked for about an hour and 15 minutes. I'll bring up some specific questions for you next time. We created some awareness for the book, but I enjoyed talking with you. If you want to shoot the breeze again, I'd love to have you back.
Oh, love to talk about Japan and some stuff too, man.
All right, you got it. There's a podcast right there. I'm talking with Brutus and Barber Beefcake, and next time we talk, we're talking Japan and other stuff. Is that a deal?
That's a deal.
Sounds good, man. I enjoyed talking to you. Thanks for being on the show.
Hey, no, thank you, brother. Look forward to talking to you again.
Thank you for joining us for another classic episode of The Steve Austin Show. Please leave a rating and review on Apple Podcasts and tell your friends. For more Steve Austin Show, go to PodcastOne.com. That's PodcastOne.com.
All month long on Pluto TV, stream the biggest Tyler Perry movies free. Watch your favorites like Medea's Witness Protection and Medea's Big Happy Family. Join Tyler Perry as he goes on a couples retreat with Sharon Leal in Why Did I Get Married? Or Idris Elba and Gabrielle Union in the Tyler Perry directed film Daddy's Little Girls. Plus, Pluto TV has hundreds of channels with thousands more movies and TV shows. Available on live and on demand. Download the free Pluto TV app on all your favorite devices and start streaming now. Pluto TV. Drop in, watch free.
Hey, Friday Night Lights fans! It's Not Only Football, Friday Night Lights and Beyond is an episode-by-episode discussion of the hit TV series Friday Night Lights, hosted by yours truly, Scott Porter, who played Jason Street on the show, and my two wonderful co-hosts.
Me, Zach Guilford, a.k.a. Matt Saracen.
And me, Mae Whitman, a.k.a. someone who wasn't on the show but really, really loves it a lot.
We will also bring on some special guests, answer your questions, and tell you about what's going on in our lives today.
It's Not Only Football. Friday Night Lights and Beyond is available now wherever you get your favorite podcasts.
Clear eyes, full hearts, can't lose!
Yo, what's good? It's your boy, Big Brother Jake, a.k.a. Jake Warner, my government name. Check it out. I host a show called the Big Brother Jake Podcast, and I've taken my talents to the biggest and baddest platform on the planet. That's right, baby, PodcastOne. My show is unique as I talk about everything. Life, sports, entertainment, being a single dad juggling several jobs. I'm a hot mess, but it's damn entertaining. Subscribe and review now on Apple Podcasts and listen on PodcastOne or wherever you get your podcasts.